Good evening, everybody. Welcome to yet another Tuesday night live stream. Really excited for tonight's guest. We're going to be hitting this, I think, at a really good time. So I've got two gentlemen, the owners of Four Gate Whiskey Company, that have agreed to join me tonight. So really excited for this. Looking to find out a little bit more about them, their back history, a little bit more about the whiskey. We'll also be doing a little bit of a tasting, so we'll kind of go through some of the nosing and profile and all of that with it. So without further ado, let me introduce both of my guests tonight, again, of Four Gate Whiskey Company. We've got Bill Straub and Bob D'Antoni. Gentlemen, welcome tonight.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here. Appreciate you for having us on. Yes,
thank you very much. I appreciate your time. So also want to say hi to everybody who's going to be in the chat tonight. So thanks for joining and for everybody checking out the replay and everything afterward. So I guess first, why don't we do this? So before we jump right into the whiskey, how about you share with us a little bit about yourselves, your story, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. Again, my name is Bill Straub. I have a background in finance, but about 5.5, 6 years ago, I started modernthirst.com with a buddy of mine. I've always been into bourbon. It's always been a hobby since the mid '90s in college. Modern Thirst, we kind of got lucky with that. We talk about and review bourbon, write different stories and articles on that. We got lucky because we started, unbeknownst to us, we were really at the early stages of what everyone knows is the bourbon boom right now. And it kind of took off. We were getting 200, 300,000 views a month. We had to bring on extra writers just to carry the load. From that, I started doing a lot of consulting. At first, it was just helping people do barrel picks or doing tastings at parties and corporate events and things. It kind of morphed into doing some consulting with some national brands. I would kind of help them with on both the marketing side and then actually picking blends of whiskey for their releases. A little bit past that, I guess, once you're in whiskey, at some point you always have that in the back of your head, like, man, I wish I had my own whiskey. That would be pretty cool. But I met Bob through a mutual friend, and Bob had worked with Calvin Cooperage for a long time. Around the same time, I started tasting world whiskeys, Scotch and Kavalan from Taiwan and places like that. And while I don't really like that single malt recipe that much, I really love how varied their flavors are because they can use so many different kinds of barrels. And I was kind of looking for that in U.S. whiskey. When I did do consulting, no one really wanted to listen to anything about barrel finishing. It was just too expensive, too involved, and too hard to replicate on a large scale, I guess. So I kind of got it in my head that the type of whiskey that I really wanted, American whiskey with some interesting and unique finishes, we couldn't find it, so I was going to do it myself. And I called Bob and asked if he thought Calvin would be interested, and they were interested in collaborating with us. And then I asked Bob if he wanted to be involved, and he was as excited as I was, and it's just kind of taken off from there. And then, Bob, you've got a pretty extensive background in business and whatnot as well. So
yeah, so my name is Bob D'Antoni. So I've been working for damn near 40 years. So and I was doing 3 projects concurrently down at the Cooperage for Kevin and Paul McLaughlin, and probably about halfway through it, I was telling them that that Bill, I talked to Bill at another party, and he's like, "Hey man, I'd love to come down and write a review on the craft cooperage and what they do." And because when you walk in the back of their cooperage, it looks like it's 1928. It's automated for the wood and this and that, but the fires are all manual. They're daily burn. It's all scrap American oak wood. And so I invited Bill down, and he wrote up a story on Kevin and Paul McLaughlin and Calvin Cooperage, William Hornaday. And it was probably about a year later, maybe 8 or 10 months ago, from right now where we're sitting, he called me, and that's when the first conversation started taking place. And then we went to, kind of design mode and what we're going to do. But I guess to add one more short phrase on my background, I've been in accounting, audit, finance, expense reduction for, since 1982. And so, Bill wanted to do this. I'm like, hey, we got to raise a pile of cash. This is expensive business. I don't know how the pro formers work in the horse industry, but these can't be far behind. I mean, this is real money in this game. So he asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said, sure, I'll do it. Let's see if we can raise some money and see what's going on. And we found some people that had the same vision as us, that we wanted to do this as a sidebar. We wanted other people to invest in it as part of their portfolio. And Bill and our main goal was, we want to make some great whiskey. We want to have some fun. We want to be profitable from our first batch, our first year. And we want to get investors that are chill, that are going to work with us and not beat the shit out of us every day. We get to pick our partners. So that's kind of where I fit into the model here. And, once we got it going, I leaned on Kelvin again to kind of point Bill and I in the right direction on, give me a couple contacts, just somewhere where a starting point, if you would, of contacts that I could call somebody to try to find some barrels. And so that was kind of it. The potential bottler that we had gone through an interview with, they gave us a list of some other suppliers that might be useful, 2 or 3, 4 in each category. And Bill and I just kind of ran with it from there.
So from the time that you started kind of, discussing, whether or not, this will be something viable and, to really move forward from that point up until now, what was that period of time? How long did this whole, thing take?
Probably only about 8 to 10 months, to be honest. We honestly, we took a month or two, I guess, writing up some business plans and some ideas. Bob made tons of contacts before we had our first investor on board. We wanted to know what we were going to do before we asked people to invest in us. So Bob really worked really hard. He made tons of contacts, found lots he found whiskey, he found bottlers, you name it. Once we started actually talking to people about money, this might come as a big surprise to you, but whiskey's pretty hot in Louisville, Kentucky. As soon as we started talking to people about it, everybody was interested. It was just a question whether they had money to invest at the levels that we were asking. And it really kind of fell into place pretty quickly. I think we initially said we'd be done by Thanksgiving, and we were done by the day or two after Thanksgiving. So of last year in raising funds. And so we have 6 partners, 6 investors with us who are partners. And it's just been good. We've bought about 120 barrels of bourbon, bourbon and rye so far. Very little rye. You'd be surprised at how hard that is to find on the market. But yeah, so we got our first batch out, and we intentionally are kind of keeping the quantities of it a little bit low. I guess we can get into the number of bottles and such later. But for one, we weren't entirely sure how well received it would be, so we didn't want to throw 40,000 bottles out on the market on day one. So right now we're in just Kentucky and Tennessee, and kind of feeling it out to see how people respond. And so far it's been great. So.
Well, and that's good. And I think that seems like a very smart approach. Like you said, the flip side was, you dump 40,000, out in the market and cross your fingers and hope that everybody enjoys it as much as you do. And, you're nervous the whole entire time and all of that. So, I think that's probably a good approach to get that out there, see what kind of traction it really gains. So yeah, that I think that's a very, very important way to start. Kind of start small and feel things out and kind of see where it goes from there.
Our goal was, one of our main goals when we were doing the fundraising is we wanted to structure the company so that we could kind of carry through 3 batches of whiskey with our initial funding. So we're planning to do 3 in the first, by the end of 2019, we'll have a 3rd batch out. The one thing that we're doing that's a little bit different than you'll see from anybody else is every one of our batches is going to be pretty much completely different. So the next time we do a blend, it'll be a blend of different whiskeys, and then we're going to go to Kelvin Cooperage and they'll pick different finished barrels for it. And then the time after that, the same thing's going to happen. So every time we put out a batch, it'll be a completely unique whiskey. Something I really like this one. We'll talk about that a little later too. So we may do something similar to this again, but we'll never have the exact barrels and the exact whiskey in it that we had in this one. So it might be similar, but it won't be the same thing.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing that I really like when companies do something that's different. You know, I know there's a lot of people, a lot of companies who have products where they want that consistency, but I like when a companies, you know, such as yours will kind of, you know, jump to the forefront and make it known that we are going to do some different things. We're not here just to set a single kind of profile, that each release we have will be a little bit different. I think that's what, you know, may also keep people coming, that now they've got to have the next thing and, you know, something different. And it's
We
nice.
sure hope so.
Yeah. I mean, like we were talking before, I mean, it's off to a good start so far. And I think that will be a good track record for it. You know, so that's something that I appreciate. I know, you know, I like something different all the time. I know we all go to, you know, the tried and true types of things, but, you know, with what you're doing, I really kind of like that kind of process of that, being able to give something different to everybody on different, you know, batch releases.
Right. Yeah, so I wanted to just add to what Bill said. You said like when we got started. So, you know, at the beginning, we were literally only talking maybe once or twice a week. And then it got to the point of, okay, Bill's throwing some names in the hat. I'm throwing some names in the hat. I'm like, you know, I think we need to get it. We need to get an EIN number. We need to do this. We need to form an LLC. We need to put some documents out. We need to tell them that we've at least named the company. I mean, I'm talking to some different suppliers and talking to people, and they're like, "What's the name of the whiskey company?" Okay, well, we haven't named it yet. Like, you know what? We really kind of need to step up and get this done. And then I hired an attorney that I've worked with and known personally for years. I hired a CPA that's independent, that's done a lot of work for myself and my wife. And so then we got those guys going, but we still didn't have the name and what we were doing. And then Bill and I were really focusing on that. And then we're thinking, okay, when are we going to start making some phone calls? And how big do we want it to be? And then we were also looking at, you know, what percentage did we want to keep versus sell? And we really wanted to keep with the same model of we wanted to have a fun environment where our investors that are buying in understand that we're going to do that, and it's not about Phil and I ourselves. And so we split up the company evenly. And a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people that said, don't do it. You and Bill keep 51%, sell the other one for the same amount that you're looking for. I'm like, you know what? I'm not really into it that way. You know, if we wanted, we could have probably done it and done it that way easy. We just chose not to. And this way, I think we got our investors, we got them clean. They know exactly what we're doing. We've got an open book. And it just kind of rose from that to, you know, finding out the name, getting the documents. Then we finally got the wholesale license under that name. And then we're like, man, we got to put a bottle and start designing stuff. And then that just kind of rolled into like late summer. And, you know, our first contact with the labeling company was at the beginning of August. And we got our first investor about 2 weeks later.
Can we talk about the name real quick too? Because that's one of the first questions we always get is what the hell is Four Gate?
That was going to be my next question. So my next question was going to be, so what's behind the name Four Gate? Where does that come from?
Bobby suggested it. One thing we discussed names and everything, and one thing we were both in agreement on from the start, and I was very adamant about, is I didn't want to resurrect a name that we had nothing to do with. It's fine for other companies to do it, but it's just I can't do it and feel genuine when I do. I didn't want to name it after myself and call it Old Bill's Reserve or something silly like that. So, but we wanted something that kind of spoke to the area. We're both natives of Louisville, Kentucky, and we both wanted something that kind of spoke to that. And Bobby tossed out Four Gate, and I said, well, I don't even know what that means. And Four Gate is a slang term for the four-rail fence, which is that usually black or white, and they surround horse farms in central Kentucky. It's very iconic, even though you don't really know just by the name Four Gate. It's a very iconic image in Kentucky. And we just kind of liked it. We thought it sounded good and rolls off the tongue pretty well. But more importantly, it just, you know, it allows us to use that imagery and that and evoke those thoughts and feelings when you drive through central Kentucky. So.
Yeah, and that was my thought when, like, just looking at the label, you know, you think of Kentucky and horse racing and, you know, the stables and all that, and you start to put a little bit two and two together that maybe that's, a little bit of, why that was, but you never know. And, not being from Kentucky, you don't hear the slang or the terminology. So yeah, that's really cool. I like when you can make it a little bit kind of personal and hometown for you. So
I also didn't want to name it after my daughter because my oldest is only 5, so we kind of figured that would be inappropriate. Call it Old Molly's or something like that. So
yeah,
if you look at your sample bottle that's right there to your right, you'll see on the front of it at the bottom, we put even the Four Gate fence there on the bottom of the label there.
Oh yeah, I guess I didn't even think about that. I didn't even look at it, but it just looks like it's part of the printing at the bottom. So that's very cool. Yeah. That is very neat.
Yeah, and we did that on the front of our label on the where the writing is here, and then when you spin the bottle around, the fence rolls to the back label as well.
Oh, so very neat.
We just kind of designed it that way.
So on your future releases, will all the labels or labeling still kind of remain the same for the most part, or will those change?
Yeah. So the batch name at the bottom here, hopefully everyone can kind of see it. The first one is called the Kelvin Collaboration because we wanted to pay homage to Kelvin Cooperage, who is going to collaborate on every batch we do. That'll change. But the rest of it will pretty much stay the same. When we release a rye, we'll use a different color scheme. And then we have something else planned that we're not really talking about yet that will probably be a different color scheme as well.
Very cool. All right, so I've got one question. If you guys, before we kind of get into the whiskey, we'll get into that here in just a second. I've got one question from Prestige Liquids WW, and he was asking, what is the biggest challenge faced by craft distillers in the U.S.? So maybe that would apply to you, considering this is maybe along the craft line of things.
We're sourced, so it's kind of hard to say for sure. I know we've spoken with a lot of people in the industry, including some guys who are kind of working with craft distilleries in Kentucky, and one of the issues they find is distribution. It's very hard to get someone to push your product when you're a new distiller. And obviously, we source our whiskey, so we're not distillers. I want to make sure that everyone is aware. We're as transparent as possible. You can go to our website and find every stat we're legally allowed to tell you about this batch under our whiskey. But they have issues with distributors, and one thing that's been tossed about is maybe a kind of a trade association for craft distillers where they might even create their own distributorship in Kentucky that would only carry very small run craft whiskeys. Kind of push those. It's kind of hard if you don't have, they call it a halo product if it's a very high end or expensive. If you're kind of in the middle there, it's kind of hard to get a push against, if somebody's got Blanton's on their truck, that distributor is probably going to unload that pretty easily, and it might be a little harder for the craft guy to get his stuff out there.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the big issues.
Yeah, and you guys fall, clearly into that premium product category. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and the other thing is when you're looking at doing what our business model was, that when you don't have any assets, you don't have any juice, and you're starting out from scratch, it's expensive. It's expensive to buy the glass, the corks, to get good premium labels. It's all expensive. It's expensive to process it. You've got to come into this game with a lot of cash, and then you've got to find some people that want to work with you. We found quite a few that want to help us be successful, and in turn, by us working with them, we're going to help them continue their success. But they really need. You've got to find the right suppliers at every level that want to help us be successul. Because if they don't, they're not going to sell to you.
It's very much a relationship game, and I will say that I got so lucky that Bob agreed to do this with me because he has been phenomenal building these relationships for us. It has been unreal. The type of relationships he's forged from out of nowhere with suppliers who actually call us before they call much bigger names. It's been fantastic. But on the, talking about premium bourbon, we never intended for this to come out at its price point. We were actually aiming much lower than that. Our first batch, we sampled 25 of our barrels, and one of them was completely empty. 2 of them probably had about 10 gallons in them. The average on it was probably around 25 gallons a barrel, and they were really expensive barrels to start out with. So we could have brought the price down by adding water, and we had lots of people tell us to do that, that you can make a lot more money, but we're making the whiskey that I always wanted to make but couldn't find. And that whiskey, I wanted uncut. I wanted non-chill filtered. I wanted uncut. So that's what we did. We didn't add water to it. I highly encourage if anyone grabs a bottle of this, if you want to drop an ice cube in it or have a little bit of water with it, that's fine. It does open up a lot of aromas. But I just wanted to present it a certain way. And unfortunately, that costs a lot. I actually think our distributors and retail are making more higher margin on this than we are. But regardless, we weren't really concerned with the final cost is, I guess, what we really wanted to say. We just wanted to put out the best whiskey we could. And that price point is kind of where it wound up.
Well, and with that being said, you essentially crafted a whiskey that as a whiskey enthusiast that you guys obviously are, you made something or produced something that fit what you wanted to drink. You weren't necessarily trying to appeal to everybody because that's just not going to be the case. So you produced a whiskey that you would really enjoy.
Right. And we're not even taking money out of the company for the first year or so, and we're just putting it right back into kind of helping the company remain stable and grow. So, we're not even making it. We're spending, I know Bob's spending probably 25, 30 hours a week on this because I know I am, and he's working harder than I am. But we're not making a dime from it for the first year at least. So
no, the other thing when you're talking about the cost and what's going on, you got to remember when you first do any of these pro formas and you're looking at them, and then the yields change substantially, and it's not, everybody's just giving you a number. They don't know if it's going to be 28, 31, 22, or 25
gallons per barrel. Yeah.
Actual gallons per barrel, not proof gallons. And then, that there's a zillion dollars in cost, and people like, well, how are you coming into the market at this price? I said, look, we're not going to buy cheaper whiskey and come out, which you and Bill were just discussing, and drop 10,000 or more bottles and try to go head to head with a brand that's already out there for $49 to $79. We'll be bankrupt in 6 months, or not. Maybe not bankrupt, but what you would do is go, okay, your product's not selling. The distributors are coming back to you for bill back money. And we might be better off liquidating the barrels that we have in inventory than moving forward with this business model. And our whole thought process was we need to come out with a premium over $150 for the first batch. Let's see where it's going to be. And when the yields and some other things changed, and some of our other operating costs, I told Bill, I forget when it was probably about 3.5 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. I said, we got to quit beating around the bush. I said, let's just get $200 in our head. We'll work from there. And this is the number that's going to hit the distributor. The distributor still got to pay the excise tax, the VA tax in Kentucky. Tennessee, they got to pay in some other city and state taxes. Then it goes to the retail, and the retailers make a lot of money. And they're the end, to the actual customer. But when you're looking at that business model, you think, I can't believe you're selling your whiskey for $200. I said, we're not getting $200. If anybody knows any of how the margins are and what's going on, you'll know that it's a multi-tier, 3-tier system. We're trying to put a couple nickels in our pocket. We want both our distributors to do the same because they're getting it out there, and then they know who their clients are going to be that would absorb another product that comes out in this price range. Yeah. But the last thing we wanted to do is come out at $79 or $80 and have this type of product. Everybody's just going to look past it and blow it off.
Yeah, and we see that as as you guys and us as well as consumers. We either agree or disagree or complain about it, but like you are dealing with all of the daily ins and outs of sourcing and bottling and doing all of that stuff, so that by the end of the day, all of that factors into the pricing. So that's a difficult. I can imagine that's a very difficult kind of proposition from the standpoint of setting a market price for a new whiskey knowing that, you may get a little bit of like pushback, but you're operating from the understanding that, you know what all of the behind the scenes, the operations of what goes into producing that, getting it onto the shelves for retail and all of that. So
yeah, I mean, all you've got to do is take a 20-hour week and say you're starting up another business, any business, it doesn't matter, and go try to source some of it, and then figure out what your numbers are going to come to when you don't have any assets. It's extremely difficult. Yeah. I mean, people that give me any feedback, I'm like, you don't know what the numbers are, but believe me, we're not getting rich off of batch 1, batch 2, or batch 3. We're trying to deliver a great product to the market that people will enjoy. Especially obviously in the 2 markets that we're in, but this isn't something where we're like, as soon as we get paid on batch 1 from our distributors, then we're going to be making this huge cash distribution to all of our investors. It's not that way. Nobody gets paid. Yeah. Okay. There's no distribution. The only distributions are, as people know, in any business, it's K1 distributions for taxes only. There's no positive cash flow being distributed when we're trying to grow this and acquire more inventory.
Yeah. That's understandable, I guess. So here, I got one more question before, and then we'll kind of get into the whiskey. We'll kind of do some of that.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah. So with that being said, Jason from the Mash and Drum, who also runs a whiskey review channel.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he asked with that kind of, with what Bob was just saying, he had asked the question, is sourcing becoming more difficult with so many craft distilleries, or is there plenty of whiskey really out there?
It kind of depends on what you're looking for. So certain ones are very difficult to find. I know when you think sourcing, everyone immediately goes to MGP. And I've had several people tell me, oh, you found some 11-year-old MGP stuff. Well, no, we didn't. MGP bourbon and rye is insanely expensive. It is more expensive than anything I've seen from Kentucky. If it has any amount of age on it at all, if you want to buy something that's about 10 months old, it's affordable. But right now it's fairly tight. They come in waves. There'll be a single load of barrels hit the market, and if you don't jump on them, they're gone. But really what we've seen is what's impossible to find is rye with any sort of age on it. You can get an 18-month up to maybe 2 or 3 years. And we're trying hard to find it, but it is really tight right now. Everybody wants rye. And frankly, 8-9 years ago, not many people were making it. So I do think in the future it will loosen up a bit. We've seen a lot of these craft distilleries starting in the last 5 years that are now using their own product. And, the Willets of the world who are buying it from other places are producing their own now. So hopefully that does loosen up a little bit in the future. But right now it's still pretty tight, probably tighter than it was 3 years ago, as a matter of fact. Just because we had all of those stocks of places like MGP that are completely, they're basically empty of anything of age right now. So,
interesting. Yeah, rye right now is, as you guys know, I mean, it's a hot commodity. Everybody wants it, So I can imagine trying to at least purchase even a rye with some age on it is probably extremely difficult.
You just can't find it. It just doesn't exist right now. No one will sell it if they have it anyway. So
I mean, we found
all right. So why don't we move on? We'll move on to the star of the show tonight. So I guess with that being said, do you guys mind kind of just sharing a little bit more detail about the whiskey, the process, kind of
sure,
everything that kind of really went into what you got in the bottle today?
So when like I said, we've bought around 120 barrels of bourbon, and when we launched batch 1. We talked about using different barrels, different batches, different distilleries. But ultimately, what we really wanted to do was kind of put our best foot forward in terms of the whiskey. So we took our oldest stuff, which was at the time 11 years old. It's since actually it turned 12 the day we bottled, but that was long after it had been put in the secondary barrel. But here you go, Bob. But we wanted to take our best whiskey and start with that. So we had 25 barrels opened, and we sampled from those of 11-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon. It's 74% corn, 18% rye, and 8% malted barley. from that, I created 3 different blends, and from those 25 barrels, there were kind of 3 distinct flavor profiles that were kind of dominant that I found. So I blended towards those profiles. One was sweet, one was spicy, and one was very oaky. So we sat down, we picked the ones we wanted. Bob and I did. We knew which ones we liked, but we actually wanted to get a little bit more some second opinion to make sure we were making the right decision. We called in Brian Hara, Sippin' Corn online, a bourbon author, and we called in 2 guys from the Louisville Bourbon Hounds, which is a very, very extensive and influential group here in Louisville. And we had them taste the 3 different samples at Kelvin Cooperage, and luckily they all picked the same one that we liked too. So we had our blend. It's 14 barrels, 11 years old. And we had William Hornaday, who's the managing director at Kelvin Cooperage. We had him taste them. And we talked about what we tasted and what type of flavors, and I gave him my tasting notes on it. And we kind of agreed that it was the spicy blend. It has a little tannic pop at the end of it. And he asked what we thought in terms of finishing. And I said, well, this is where you come in. I just feel like with something sweet like that or spicy like this, we probably want a sweet finish. But I don't want to do just the same thing you can find on the street. I don't want just a sherry finish. I don't want just a port finish. You can find that anywhere. So I asked him for something unique and different, and he said, we just happen to have these 6 barrels. They're 59-gallon barrels. We only have 6 of them, and they were originally Oloroso sherry barrels from Spain. And they went down to the Caribbean, and someone made a batch of rum in them, and then they sold them to Kelvin Cooperage. And we said, absolutely, let's go check them out. So we opened up the barrels. They were still, you could look down in it, and there was probably an inch of liquid in the bottom of each one. We kind of drained those and took a big smell, and it smelled like a combination of dark chocolate powder and a huge bomb of maple syrup right off the bat. It was probably the best smelling barrels I've ever smelled. They were phenomenal. So on the spot, we took all 6 of them.
And that also set the size of the batch too.
Yeah, and that's why there are the number of bottles there are in batch 1. We'd actually planned to be a little higher. So there's 1,732 bottles in this batch. We'd actually we're probably thinking more like 2,000, and I know batch 2 will be closer to 2,000 just because we're back to regular size barrels. So basically what that gave us is we spent 3 months. Like I said, these barrels were still fresh. They'd never been used for anything else, and they were probably fresh off the truck at the time that we went out and bought them. And so it only took about 3 months. After 2 months, I was starting to think it was time to pull the trigger. I'm not a fan of really heavy finishes. I just want to kind of accentuate the flavors a little bit and complement the bourbon. I don't want to overpower it. The biggest issue we had with the blend itself is that I felt like it was very centered on the front of the palate, and the finish kind of dropped off fairly quickly. I knew with this sherry rum combination that the first thing you were going to get is kind of this mouth coating of the rum and sherry, and that's exactly what we got out of it. So it kind of addressed the one flaw that I felt was, if you want to call it a flaw, the one weakest point of the whiskey itself. And that's really all we were looking to do, is just shore up the kind of the down notes on the whiskey as a whole.
So I guess with that being said, so once you sourced your bourbon, mm-hmm. was the intention at some point to possibly just release what had been sourced without a finishing aspect at all? No,
there's any number of places I could go to get that, right? I mean, lots of people buy bourbon, and there's lots of bourbon sourced or not that's on the market. So I didn't really want to. There's no reason for me for us to make that company, because if that's what we want, we can just go buy the bourbon. I really wanted the bourbon I couldn't find, and I was really just intrigued and enamored of what Kelvin Cooperage does. They make new barrels, but they also source thousands upon thousands of used barrels that they'll buy from all sorts of different wineries and rum distilleries and wine, breweries, and then they sell them. They ship them all over the world to anyone who uses used cooperage. And when you walk through their warehouse, it's like, if you're into spirits at all, it's like going to Disneyland. There are just thousands of barrels from all over the world sitting in there, from Isla Scotch barrels to big hogshead port barrels to you name it, it's there. And that's what I want to do. I want to do something a little bit different. I don't want to do the same thing everybody else is doing. Okay, if I'm doing that, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because now you've got something that, like you said, is going to be unique. It's going to be a little bit of a different finish to something, making your product stand out and be unique from the others.
Right.
Yeah. So when you chose those barrels, did it just happen to be kind of coincidence that's what it really ended up being? I mean, I think it would be hard to go out probably seeking something where it was, Oloroso barrels that then ultimately had rum in it. It seems like a really interesting and unique kind of combination with that.
Here's how it went. Is we were in the meeting and we were talking with William Hornaday, and William said, "Hey, I just got this small lot of barrels in. They're some of the best barrels that we brought in here on a small lot. Totally unique. We never get them in. And in 7 or 8 years that he's been with the cooperage, he said, these are some of the best ones. You ought to come back here. I've got 6 of them. And we're good. And I'm doing the math real quick. I'm like, okay, 6 times about 59 or 60 gallons. This is going to give us about 350 gallons of juice that we could finish in these. Let's go back there and look at them. We go back there and he pulled the buns on all of them. We're smelling them, looking at them, and we're like, okay, let's wrap these in cellophane. We'll take all 6 of them and let's keep them stored for us. And we're going to ship them to our bottler and get them filled. And then probably wasn't another month. And I had the whiskey being transferred through our broker to us. And then we went down and, as Bill said earlier, we pulled samples on all 25 barrels. He took them back, and I didn't get to do that job. He sampled them.
It's all a rough life.
Yeah,
he sampled them all, and then and that's how we really got to it. William was the one that brought it up and said, "Hey, I got 6 barrels out in the back they really smell amazing. Some of the best ones that have come in here in the last 7 or 8 years."
Yeah, and even when I got to kind of reading some of it, I kind of already started thinking, well, this is going to be really unique and different, just because you don't see that same finishing a lot of times where it's the sherry and rum finished in the same cask, where a lot of times it may be individual and you're constantly kind of transporting
Right.
cask.
Yeah.
But that was really, really kind of interesting, and the fact that it went into 59-gallon barrels.
Yeah, and it's that was the thing that kind of struck us. We'd had many discussions with them that we don't want to just get a sherry barrel and finish it. I mean, that's fantastic, but I can buy that on the shelf from a number of different places. We want to do something different, and these were the most unique barrels I had seen in a while, and they smelled so amazing. And that mingling of the sherry and the rum in the barrel, as opposed to just pouring 2 whiskeys finished in those together, was a totally unique scent to me. I've never smelled that strong of a maple syrup mixed with powdered dark chocolate in my life. And there was no way anyone who's listening and watching this, there's no way you would have said no to it if you'd smelled those barrels. They are amazing. But that's really why we approached Kelvin Cooperage in the first place. They have access to all of these amazing barrels, and they're also, no one knows more about how barrels affect whiskey than these guys. They've been doing it since the 1960s. They started in Scotland in 1963 in Glasgow, and they moved to the U.S. in the 1990s, and this is what they do for a living. I feel like a lot of when you talk to these guys, they have this wealth of knowledge, and they're so eager to be involved on the creative side. But but I guess a lot of their folks kind of come to them, and it's just a commodity. How many barrels can you get us, and how cheap can they be? And they try over and over and say, look, we have a lot of great knowledge here. We have a lot of great palates, and we can help you be successful if you will take our advice instead of just treating this like, we need 8,000 bushels of wheat. How cheaply can we get them? So they're really our partners in this, and our collaborators. They let us put their names on the bottles and use their logos and imagery anywhere we want. And we can't thank them enough. They are phenomenal guys, phenomenal people, and we're thrilled.
Well, it sounds like a great partnership, so that's fantastic. So going back to this, when you sent me the sample bottle and I first opened it up, like right away, I wanted to get what that aroma was. And it was literally maple syrup, waffles. I mean, it was all of that. You got that kind of I guess I'll call it like a powder or a dusty kind of like chocolate, something you'd sprinkle on something. And it
like
was
Nestle Quick for me.
It was
like a dark Nestle Quick powder.
Yeah, that would be like whatever you'd spoon into a glass or something. That was exactly what it was. And then shortly thereafter, you got that finishing aspect. And to me, when I said that, or when I was thinking it, I was thinking just something that was very like wine forward. It wasn't that I necessarily could pick it out right away, but you could tell there was that wine influence on it. And it was just a really unique, interesting, balanced, nose. And that was all before I even, tasted it. So you kind of knew, what you were about ready to taste. You hope that the nose and palate were going to match up, because I was really enjoying the nose on it.
The best feedback we've gotten so far from everyone seems to be that they just want to smell it. And I love it. I love the smell of it. The sherry is nowhere else as prominent as it is on the nose. Right on the front of the palate, you get a burst of that fortified sweet wine, but it is real prominent on the nose. When you taste it, the bourbon flavors tend to be kind of more on the mid palate. You get a lot of the caramel and the oak and a little bit of vanilla and a lot of black pepper from that high rye mash bill. But after that, the rum kind of takes over, the rum influence. So it's been very interesting when we saw how this developed in the barrels, how it went from being predominantly sherry at the start to being such a strong. I think if we left them in there any longer, you would have thought it was a rum finish.
Yeah, it's that's one of the, even tasting it like now, because probably from the time I had it till now has maybe been, I don't know, maybe whatever, 7, 8, 9 days. It is such a well-balanced whiskey. You get hit right away. It punches you with that heat, and then that kind of quickly dissipates. And then once the heat goes away, the remaining parts, just how it coats your mouth, with it being that non-chill filter, it's got a great mouthfeel, and it leaves all of those fantastic flavors. You start to get a little bit of the dryness from like the sherry, with like the sweetness of the rum, with like a back layer of, like you said before, a little bit of that kind of black pepper and some really nice bourbon notes. So for me, I guess how I would describe this as anybody who enjoys, I don't even want to say a finished whiskey, I would just say a great whiskey in general. You guys have done a fantastic job with it, period.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're really proud of it. We're real happy with the way it turned out. I love it. I can't stop drinking it. The one thing that I always say on it is that it's not the sweetest bourbon that I've ever had, even the sweetest, even as a finished bourbon. But it just seems to be very soft on the palate for being as high rye as it is. You do get a lot of that rye spice on the back of the palate, but it's sneaky. It's 123.4 proof, and everyone thinks that we did that on purpose. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just the luck of the draw on that. But it's sneaky. It's so easy to drink that in my case, I'll sit down with a glass, and before I know it, I've had 3 and time to go to bed.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's the, like a true sign of a great whiskey is when you get all of those complex flavors and it just coats your mouth like so well. For me, it's really what like I look for. I like the higher proof whiskeys. I love when it's non-chill filtered to, allow for, some of those, I don't want to say like impurities, but some of the fatty acids to remain there.
Sure.
But really, I think it helps to coat the mouth, and allow for all of those flavors that you wanted to be there to really kind of coat the mouth and really just be there for everybody.
The last thing we wanted to do was strip out the flavors we love from the bourbon before we finished it. So I think at one point I asked them if they could literally just pour it straight from one barrel or straight from the finished barrels into the bottles. And they said the law does not allow them to do that. So we did get the minimal, just a mesh filtering, I guess is what it was. So
yeah. And they also dumped it on Monday afternoon, and we were bottling it Tuesday morning at 8:15.
Yeah.
And it was really good. They gave us what the actual proof was and all that. They did all the labels overnight, to get them going on the rolls. And it really turned out great. When you're, the part that I like about it, I like that spicy finish. I like all the I like the high proof. At the beginning, Bill was like, "No, we got to go full proof. It's got to be barrel strength, whatever you want to use." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go with it." And when we put it in, when we got it our barrels averaged about 125.7, and when we put it in these finishing casks, this is where it came out. And so a lot of the samples, I want to say maybe after the first month or the first 6 weeks, the samples were coming back to Bill and I at like 124.8, and we let it sit in there. Bill's like, let's let it stay, you know. And we talked to the guys at Kelvin, and they said, hey, look, another 2 or 3 weeks ain't gonna hurt it. Let it stay in there. We're gonna dump it either the Friday before we bottle on that Tuesday, or we're gonna dump it that Monday. And we talked to the folks at the bottle, and they said, you can dump it on Monday. And we said, okay, we don't need more samples, because I was going down picking up the samples about every 2 weeks from 2 of the 6 casks.
Yeah. So we waited a month, and then we tasted it every 2 weeks thereafter, I think.
And so it was in the finishing barrels for, did you say 60 or 90 days?
About 90 days,
About 90 days.
like just a hair over 3 months, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I actually wanted to pull it. I had a conversation with Bob and with the guys at Kelvin that I thought it was ready probably 2 weeks earlier. And they convinced me to wait about 2 weeks, and it worked. When that last sample came in, there was no doubt on anyone's mind that it was what we were looking for. I hope everyone else agrees, but it was excellent.
Yeah, and a couple of people have asked. Nobody's asked tonight, or you haven't, or none of the guests. But the actual age when we put it into the secondary cask to rebarrel it was almost. It was right at 11 years and 9 months. And the rest of Bill was telling you about the other product that we have. Our other lots of this same whiskey have all just turned 12 years old.
We'll see some of that in the future too. So obviously we're going to use that.
Yeah, we're bringing that back out to everyone.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, for me, this is maybe about as long of a finish I've had on a whiskey in quite some time. I mean, really, really great, sherry notes. And then really as that finish develops, for me, that lingering spice, which is really nice, is just left like right in the mid and back of the palate with that nice little bit of chocolate there.
I'm a huge fan of bourbon with high rye content. I really, I know the current craze is for wheaters. I have my share of them, but I only rarely drink them. I really like anything with a lot of rye. I love that spice. And this was right up my alley. As soon as Bob found this, we were going to roll with some Tennessee stuff originally. And Bob, I was on my way home from a meeting in Shelbyville, and Bob sent me a text that he found some 11-year-old Kentucky bourbon, and I about wrecked my car. We asked for samples right away, and we bought as much of it as we could. So we have bourbon now. It ranges anywhere from roughly 3 years to 12. Not very much of the younger stuff, but we have a little bit of it, and we're going to let that sit for a few years before we use it. The really young stuff.
It is. I mean, I'll tell you guys have done a fantastic. I mean, the partnership and everybody involved have done a fantastic job. I mean, just doing as an independent, review, I would say this would be something I would tell a lot of people who watch reviews, that, aside from the price, go buy it. I mean, it really is an absolutely fantastic whiskey. It really is. You guys,
thank you. We appreciate that. Again, if we could have brought it out for about $50 cheaper, we would have, but we would have lost money on that. So
yeah,
you'd be surprised that the amount that we sell it for, how low that is compared to the retail price. And there's very few dollars there to be pinched. We hope people like it. We hope people think it's worth the price. Again, there's not a lot of bottles on the market. So this isn't a bourbon for the masses. We understand that not everyone's going to rush out and buy it. But for the people who don't balk at the price and want hopefully a really flavorful whiskey, we hope that this is right up their alley and it's something a little different. And, for those, I'm firm believer in if you buy a bottle of whiskey, it's meant to be opened. I didn't make this to be a paperweight. But we also understand there are a lot of collectors. So one thing that you got going for you is every batch is going to be different on this. So, if you want to collect every bottle, please buy as many as possible.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you're going to collect it, at least buy 2.
Yeah.
And open one the second you get home.
Yeah.
That is a great option right there. You got to have the one to open and then the one to sit on that you don't, once you enjoy something so much, you don't want to get into the second bottle because, once that thing's gone, it's gone,
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
But it's and I guess with that, you know, for people who are thinking nowadays, you know, $200 a lot of money. It is a lot of money. However, you know, in knowing what a lot of price points are for other whiskeys, and let's just, you know, well, whatever, we don't have to name any brands, but you know, for other things that are in that $100 price range, I mean, this is worth that extra $100. I mean, I would have no problem, you know, now tasting this, you know, paying that $200 price point. I mean, I mean, I just can't get over really just how good of a product it really is.
Well, thank you so much. We were thrilled with the way it came out. The reception we're getting in Louisville. The biggest question I get is what stores is it in? And, you know, by and large, the bourbon hounds, the bourbon hunters are finding it before I can, finding out where it is before I do. I have yet to actually see it on a shelf. I know a couple of chains got 5 or 6 cases and sold out in a day or so. But most of the big chains haven't got it yet around Louisville anyway, and some of the bigger independent stores that get it this week.
So where is most of it? Is most of it in Kentucky, or is it equal?
Yeah,
to Tennessee?
Most of it's in Kentucky. Our goal is about, at least until we really up production, about 25% of it will go to Tennessee. So if you're looking for it, the distributor in Kentucky is Republic National. The distributor in Tennessee is Littman Brothers. Unfortunately, I don't believe Littman goes to Memphis and a lot of West Tennessee. They do Nashville and Knoxville and some of the other Chattanooga, the other big bourbon centers. If you know someone, if you're looking for it in Tennessee or somewhere in Kentucky, you can ask them to contact their rep. I do know they've also sold all of them in Tennessee, and there's no more for them to get, unfortunately. So they either have it or they don't.
Yeah, well, good. That's good to know. I'm hoping that, you know, people now and then watching the replay afterwards will leave some comments. Let me know, if you were able to find a bottle, your thoughts on all of that. I'm always really interested to know or hear from people who've you know, heard about the product, you know, bought it, tried it. You know, that's the important thing, and it allows for good you know, feedback for you guys. Yeah. So with that being said, so I know we're quickly approaching the 1 hour mark. So with Four Gate, what do you kind of have brewing for the future, if you want to shed a little light on that?
Yeah, so our next batch 2 will be out in right around Labor Day, so sometime in September. Assuming that it's ready by then. Obviously we can't rush the finish process. So assuming it's ready, and we think it will, again, the barrels that we're using, we're not going to reveal what they are yet. But assuming that they're ready, but the ones we have are again, they're very fresh, so they shouldn't take long. And we're not using finished barrels a second time. We sell them. We give them to Kelvin, and they sell them because that's their thanks for helping us out, like they do. That'll be out in September, and then we're gonna have a Christmas batch. And I can tell you that you will never have had some of the flavors in the second batch. And the third batch is we're allowing Kelvin to get really, really creative. From a cooperage standpoint. So they're actually coopering some very, very unique barrels for us for the finish on the Christmas batch.
Right. So with batch 2, how much of a little snippet that do you want to share with everybody regarding what that may be?
It's once again, it's a dual finish barrel. So it's a barrel that was used once to make something and then once to make something else. It is. I'll tell you that the first use of that barrel is something that has been used in bourbon before, and I'm very much not a fan of. But when it was used in the second barrels, it completely changed the flavor, and I am so excited to see what it tastes like. I'm a little bit nervous because it's so different, but it'll be fun. And we're blending some whiskey from different. You know, this is all from one producer in this one. The batch 2 will be a combination of 2 different lots, so 2 different 2 different ages, 2 different producers. So we're kind of excited. We'll have some of this in it, some of this 12-year. It'll be 12 by then in it as well. But it'll be very excited. It will also be, you know, batch proof. We haven't picked the name for it yet either. So it's going to be a tough one.
Well, another comment that I wanted to add to what Bill was just saying and what you were asking about on this whiskey is when it became available and we were looking at it and we're saying, you know, it's 125.7 on all of our samples that we got. We're thinking, you know what, let's just release it right at cast strength. Let's do whatever we're going to do, but let's don't add water. And we knew in the marketplace that we weren't buying all of it. So somebody else is obviously purchasing it. And we know we wanted to stand ourselves completely different and be at the opposite end of the spectrum than anyone else. And Bill's like, we got no water added, no water added. And we're talking to the people and they're like, this here is another big cost when you go to bottling. That if you don't add any water and you want to wait till the very end, they're telling you it's a lot more expensive. And then you're getting into a couple of other things. And so we just kind of stuck to our guns. And, Bill's like, I don't want to add any water. I said, we'll just keep the price where we have to keep it. Let's just figure out where our margins are going to be and what we're going to do. And let's deliver a great product to the market.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you kind of stuck to your guns and decided to not add water, to this. Now, again, I don't know what that profile would have been. I can't imagine it would have been nearly as good as this is. This is as full bodied of a whiskey that I've had in quite some time. So I really hope people, when they get their hands on this, like you said, they open it and enjoy it. I don't think it'll be long before the word spreads as to really, how good of a job and how good of a whiskey you guys are really putting, out on the market.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate it. I have some feedback I've had is a lot of people who don't really like that really high proof whiskey. If you let it sit and open up for a little bit, it kind of helps that quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know because I can't leave it in my glass long enough to let it sit out.
Well,
but
too, from doing this and doing your show and with your audience, if you have the dilution calculators and you have that software on your laptop, and you want to take something from 125 down to 100 or down to 90, you're adding a hell of a lot of water. And that's not something that we really wanted to do. We didn't want to pay that type of money for 11-and-a-half-year-old, almost 12-year-old whiskey, and then go back and just pour a ton of water in there and dilute it and take away so much of the flavors. Everything that you've talked about tonight is a result of it being at full proof.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people, nowadays, as you're aware of, people do, and store picks in general have become so popular, and a lot of people go to these places, they're able to enjoy something, straight out of the barrel, get that full whatever the whiskey has to offer. And then the distillery tells you, oh, by the way, we're going to take that 120 proof, we're going to cut it down to 100, and well, we don't really know if it's going to taste the same, but here you go. Here's your product. So, that's a little bit, discouraging. So I'm really glad that you went down the road of just keeping this stuff, straight from the barrel and into a bottle. And this is what everybody gets. So I really hope that people get an opportunity to try this. I think this will allow for a lot of people or it to kind of set the precedent that they understand what it is you're doing and the quality of the product that you're putting out. I know there's limited, bottles that are out there, but I hope a lot of people, do have the opportunity to, even if they don't get a bottle, to try it and really see what it is you guys are doing.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We hope people like it. In the future, we do hope to expand to a few additional states. By the nature of our business and the fact that we're barrel finishing these in unique finishes means that there's not always a huge, there's not a big stack of 100 barrels at Kelvin Cooperage that are this unique to choose from. So we are limited in how much we can ever really produce in one batch. We do hope to expand a little bit to some additional states. We might have a few surprises up our sleeve from a single barrel perspective around 2020, maybe end of 2020. Stick with us, and hopefully everyone kind of enjoys the ride with us. Again, we're enthusiasts. We do this for fun right now, and really, we're doing it because it's a lot of fun, and we like to try different things, and we hope other people want to try it with us.
Yeah. Well, great. So, I'll give you a little opportunity here to kind of just plug what you've got going on, where people can find you, really anything having to do with Four Gate.
Absolutely. We're so if you're in Louisville this Thursday, we'll be at Westport Whiskey and Wine doing a tasting there. And then if you want to look for us on the web, we're at Four Gate. That's 4_gate at Twitter. We're on Facebook as Four Gate Whiskey Company, and then also on Instagram as Four Gate. And you can also find us at fourgatewhiskey.com.
Yeah,
Great.
Well, an article today and give them.
Yeah, I mean, there's distillerytrail.com, and a few other places have already posted some articles, and there's been a few reviews out there. So you can check those out. We sent out a number of different sample bottles, so hopefully we'll see some more write-ups on that over the next week or so.
Yeah, well, fantastic. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. More importantly, thanks to Bill and Bob for joining me tonight. Really, kind of allowing to kind of get the word out for your product. I think it's an absolutely fantastic whiskey, and I think people are really going to enjoy it. So again, thank you very much for your time, and everybody for tuning in tonight. And like I say, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.